One is definitely back with a bang. And whilst the action on track hasn't been the most scintillating, the fallout from the Red Bull rift has continued to be the talk of the town. Alpine have their own dramas to contend with, and if that wasn't enough, the FIA's president is being investigated. So, plenty to talk about. I'm Jenny Gow, and this is the F1 Checkered Flag podcast. Joined by Harry Benjamin, BBC's F1 commentator, Jack Aitken, former F1 driver, and Andrew Benson, the BBC's chief F1 writer. So it's round 2 of the Formula One World Championship in Jeddah as the host city. But as usual this year, it's the off-track action that is the gift that just keeps on giving. We're going to start with Red Bull. We should probably set it up, Andrew. And you've been working on this for what feels like forever.
Yeah, it's been quite the story for the last sort of month or so. I think people know the details of there's been allegations about Christian Horner, and a female employee has accused him of inappropriate behaviour. Red Bull employed a KC to look into the matter, and last Wednesday, before the Bahrain Grand Prix track action started, after that lawyer had filed his report, the Red Bull board dismissed the grievance. Red Bull have given no further details on that matter. Since then, though, Jos Verstappen, the father of Max Verstappen, Red Bull's 3-time world champion, said that the controversy was driving people apart. It cannot continue this way. The situation is not good for the team. Today, the complainant has been suspended by Red Bull. Christian Horner said in a press conference today that he can't give any more information because it's confidential between the team and the employees. While this is all going on in Bahrain, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, the FIA president, asked Max Verstappen in private to back Horner publicly. Verstappen's response, I've been told, to that request was to say you should do your own investigation. Since then, BBC Sport has revealed that Ben Sulayem is under investigation on 2 different whistleblower complaints. The first is for allegedly meddling in the result of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix last year by asking for a penalty to Fernando Alonso to be overturned. And the second is for asking his officials not to certify the Las Vegas Grand Prix track safe for racing. Those are both under investigation by the FIA Compliance Department as we speak. Okay,
let's get on to the FIA slightly later, but let's talk about Red Bull. I mean, actually, can we separate those two things? Because this at the moment is the talk of the town. It's what everyone's talking about. How good a look is this for F1, Harry?
Oh, well, it's not a good look at all for Formula One. You know, start of a new season, we should be getting excited about the on-track racing, but the realities of it is that the off-track controversies surrounding Red Bull and the FIA are making the headlines. The bigger picture here within Red Bull is that it's almost the one thing to bring an end perhaps to their domination that is currently being seen in Formula One is themselves. Will they self-implode? Because normally what brings down great sort of teams like this is complacency after so many years at the front. And actually, in this case, it seems to be all of these off-track scandals that are really putting pressure on not only Christian Horner, but Red Bull Formula One team and Red Bull GmbH. This is not going anywhere anytime soon, and it's not a good look for Formula One.
Jack Aitken, we saw last race out Bahrain, it didn't affect anyone. It didn't seem to affect Max Verstappen. Certainly he finished seconds above everyone else. Could this affect the racing? Could this affect Max?
I think largely, thankfully, it's not really affecting the on-track racing directly. For the drivers, they will be able to distance themselves from all of this mess just by virtue of not being involved in it as directly as some of the management. But inevitably, that kind of talk, it creeps through a team, it builds uncertainty, it builds, talking behind backs. And
is it a bit like that in a team?
Everyone wants to hear a piece of the action. Everyone wants to know what you've heard. Have you seen this? Have you done that? What's going on? What's the story? And that does ultimately lead to distraction. And I think as well, for a lot of people within the Red Bull camp, it could be a little bit demoralizing because it's all pretty negative around there. It's a negative space.
One of the interesting things about this, Jenny, in the last day or so, is that Max Verstappen was asked, obviously, about this situation in his pre-race press conference, or pre-race weekend press conference, I should say. He gave an incredibly accomplished performance, but at no point did he undermine the criticisms that his father had made of Red Bull or Horner. He was asked, does Jos have any regrets about what he said? Max said, he's not a liar, that's for sure. I haven't asked him that. Did he understand how people could think he's representing you? I can understand. My dad and I are very close. Does he agree the team might explode? I don't know. I hope not. And then on the subject of the split between Horner and Jos Verstappen, he said, of course, as a son of my dad, it would be weird to be on a different side. Now, he's not actually said explicitly at any point during that in 10, 15 minutes of what I have to say was an incredibly impressive performance in public by Max Verstappen yesterday, that he's backing his father over his team boss. But you don't have to read very far between the lines to think that is what he's saying there.
Yeah, I thought the same, that it was a very accomplished Max Verstappen, and just how far he's come since he first entered the sport and threatened to headbutt a journalist to now where he's being the master of that arena. Well, let's give Christian Horner a chance to speak. He took almost 20 minutes of questions in the press conference. The other team principals just sat around looking at him, unfortunately, and he said repeatedly it was time to move on.
Obviously, there's been an awful lot of coverage surrounding this, but one has to go back to the basis of a grievance was raised, it was fully investigated, and it was dismissed. And from there, we move onwards. And I think an awful lot has been made out of this. Obviously, it has been obviously of great interest in different elements of the media for different reasons. And I think the time now is to look forward and to draw a line under it. We're here to go racing. We're here as a Formula One team. And the time now is to focus on what is going on track and the performance of the cars and the drivers and where the spotlight should be during the course of a Grand Prix weekend.
Well, that's what Christian Horner has to say. Here's Max Verstappen and how he responded on Wednesday about the controversy and how it will impact his performance this weekend.
I don't think that's really a big problem for me. I can easily switch off, switch back on whenever I need. So for me, that has never been a problem, never will be a problem. But of course, I think as everyone also within the team, we just want to focus on the performance side of things from now on.
So that was Max Verstappen speaking to Laura Winter. Andrew Benson, we don't know where this is going to go next. We haven't got the foggiest what the next thing will be, because every day we keep hearing something new. But where will this go?
I don't think it's going away anytime soon, Jenny. There's some other information that I'm working on. And of course, the woman involved in this has not spoken publicly yet. She may feel the need or wish to do so in the context of being suspended by Red Bull today. So we just have to wait and see over the next few days how things pan out, I think.
Can I just ask, as the podcast, have you ever known anything like this before in F1? I'm looking back at the things that we've covered. I can't remember anything that's been like this. So
I've been thinking about this a lot, actually. I've been involved in a lot of really big stories in Formula One. I haven't been involved in them, but I've reported on them. Crashgate, Spygate, drivers getting sacked when they're about to win the World Championship, all this kind of stuff. Drivers moving teams. Lewis Hamilton moved to Ferrari. It seems like that was eons ago now. But I really think this is the most extraordinary story to hit Formula One, possibly ever. And so there's absolutely, Christian Horner can say it's time to draw a line under it. No chance that's going to happen.
Considering the track action isn't that great at the moment, there's things to talk about. One journalist, I think Mark Hughes from the race, I was listening to him on another podcast, described it quite well. So there's always drama and intrigue in Formula One, except on race day. And that's a good summation of the first couple of weeks. But look, if we come back to a lot of eyeballs are now on this sport for good and bad, and that's brought about a lot of good things and has given more and more remit for people to, as Andrew alluded to, get in front of the cameras more and more. And we've got to be really careful here with how this sport moves on, because it's our duty, obviously, to cover all of this and highlight the truths of it. But at the same time, this is a sport, and we got the main crux of it is what is happening on the track, the racing. We want to be able to tell those storylines, and this is a massive distraction. Yes, it might not be distracting Red Bull Max Verstappen in terms of performance, because he's clearly dominating, but that's going to have a ripple effect at some point along the line, and there needs to be, it comes back to the word of the last 2 weeks, transparency, and allowing us all to not move on, but allowing us to get a clearer picture and understand where we are and how we get to the next stage.
I think what's interesting is that Formula One has never just been about the action on the track. One of the things that makes it interesting is that it's so multifaceted, so multi-layered, so nuanced. The more you know about it, the more interesting it becomes. Obviously, other sports are the same. You can watch a cricket match, but if you don't know about leg breaks and bowling off the seam and all the rest of it, you don't get as much, understanding and pleasure out of it as if you do. But Formula One has so many different layers. So I think it's not right to say that it's all about the action on the track. Yeah, of course, the action on the track is the sport, but Formula One is so much bigger than just a sport. And that's why these sorts of stories have always been a part of Formula One and always will be.
No, I completely agree. Part of the fascination with Formula One is those off-track storylines. But coming back to what you said, a story like this, which, I mean, you've been in the sport a lot longer than I have.
Don't rub it in.
No, I didn't mean to. But you've seen a lot more and experienced a lot more, as you said, with Spygate and the rest of it, and Crashgate. And the fact that this is such a almost unique story that's going on that has not quite been seen in Formula One history before, I don't think that's a good thing.
I agree with you on it not being a good thing. I feel like it tarnishes the sport at the moment, and I kind of feel a little bit dirty at the end of the races, and you're thinking, this is the sport that we've dedicated our lives to. Pretty much our working lives has been about F1, and now all of a sudden it's not looking so good, is it? And that brings us nicely, or timely, onto the subject of Mohammed bin Sulayem.
The other scandal, Jenny.
You are perfectly placed, Andrew Benson, in the shortest time as possible to bring us up to date.
Yeah, so basically, it's what I've seen a whistleblower report into these two situations, and you can read all about it on the BBC Sport website. But to encapsulate it briefly, accusation number one: Fernando Alonso was given a 10-second penalty for his mechanics touching his car while he was serving a 5-second penalty in Saudi Arabia last year. That's not allowed. And Aston Martin launched a right of review. The allegation is that Mohammed bin Sulayem, the FIA president, phoned the head of the Bahraini ASN, that's the Motorsport Federation, Sheikh Abdullah, he's known as, he's a member of the Al Khalifa royal family in Bahrain, and made it clear he wanted the penalty to be rescinded. And this allegation's come from a whistleblower. And the second allegation is that the day before the Las Vegas Grand Prix, if you remember, it was like the poster event for Formula One. Formula One had invested £500 million in that race. It's the centerpiece of their attempt to grow the sport's exposure, not just in America, but also all over the world. And the allegation is that the FIA president got in touch with his race officials and ordered them not to clear the track for racing on. It did get cleared because they couldn't find anything wrong with it. Now, people might remember that in the first practice session, Carlos Sainz hit a drain cover and the session was cancelled, and then the day was postponed. That was nothing to do with that. That was something to do. What happened was that the sort of drain body, if you like, below the surface had cracked and it had become displaced. So that was a separate issue. So two very serious allegations to be levelled against the head of motorsport's governing body, and he is now the subject of an inquiry by the FIA compliance department as a result. Would
it be wrong to ask why on earth he would want to not have that Vegas race going ahead?
You can ask. I don't know. I don't have the answer. The FIA certainly haven't provided one.
You know the answers to everything. Okay. More coming up. We'll talk about Alpine, RB, and also we'll look ahead to, surprisingly, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. And, Jack, don't worry, we will hear from you. That's all to come. Hello and welcome back to the Checkered Flag podcast. I'm Jenny Gow. Alongside me, Harry Benjamin, Jack Aitken and Andrew Benson. Jack, it's time for you and your opinions. And I think it's quite it's quite timely because we're talking about Alpine. Now, they've not had the greatest start to this season. They've then had two of their lead engineers leave in Matt Harmon and Dirk de Beer. They handed in their resignations. They were at the last Grand Prix, but no more. And Alpine have announced a whole reshuffle of their management and key engineering structure. It feels like they're in freefall. Am I right?
I think freefall, maybe it's not quite as severe as that. But I only say that because this kind of decline or lack of momentum, whichever way you want to spin it, has been going on for quite some time. They came into the sport as Renault in 2016, which feels like a lifetime ago now. I mean, I was there at the launch, and I remember talking or hearing about their 4-year plan to win the Formula One World Championship.
Worked well.
And yeah, indeed. It's been extended a little bit, as you can imagine. But they've gone through this state of almost crisis. I mean, within the team at the time, I would say it did feel like crisis because this lack of success, this lack of progress at times threatened to bring the whole thing to a grinding halt because at the end of the day, these parent companies, they want to see results for their massive investment. And we're once again at one of these crux points where they've had an awful start to the season after not a bad season last year, if not amazing. And the drivers are kicking off a little bit in the car. Management staff and technical staff are leaving or being seriously reshuffled. People that have been there for decades, like Bob Bell, we were speaking about earlier. And when that kind of shift is happening within a team for all the wrong reasons, it does feel a bit severe.
Yeah, so Bob Bell has left his advisory role with Alpine to join Aston Martin, which is the latest person to have left. There are some really good people at Enstone, which is where the factory is based. I worked with them. I spent 2 Christmases ago, I spent the entire time working on the behind the scenes with them. There are some really good people there. And I feel like they're damaging their own brand at the moment with what's going on. This is Renault. This is one of the richest motorsport companies in the world. I don't understand it.
Well, join the club, I think, and that is the problem. I think we all know collectively a lot of people in that team who are good, hard workers, and you can't pinpoint this at one person working on the factory floor. This goes higher, and there is. You mentioned 2016. I think qualifying in Bahrain for the 2 Alpines in the back row, worst result for them since 2016 Baku qualifying. 2016 with Palmer and Magnussen as the Jolien. Well, I had to get him in a 5 Live podcast somewhere.
That is awkward.
I know. Hey, Jolien. But that was the beginning of their revival. And since then, they make progress. It's like they take 1 step forward and 2 steps back every time. And now it just seems like they haven't taken that step forward again, and now they've gone a 3rd step backwards. And these technical departures as well, coming up with a straight off the bat of the first race. I don't know if that signals a good sign or if that's actually hitting the panic button
in
and going,
fairness,
uh-oh.
Those resignations happened before that race. So they were
After
tendered
not
before,
meeting
but we
requirements for
didn't
testing.
hear about it until after the race.
I just think there's something inherently wrong with the Renault Alpine structure at the moment that is limiting it from achieving its full potential, that a constructor that is ploughing millions and millions. It's Renault ploughing millions in to celebrate their Alpine brand. It's a PR move. Is that all it is for them?
I don't think it's ever been just a PR move. I think that they really do, certainly when I was there and in the years after, when I was still in touch with a lot of people at the team, I think they absolutely need the team to succeed, and that has always been the remit. But the problem, if we're going to speculate about why they failed to reach that point, is generally not been the people on the ground, so to speak. It's more been a miscommunication and mismanagement problem. And I think with the base, the headquarters of the parent company being French, being in France, a lot of operations still taking place in Paris. And from afar, really, from Enstone, that mismatch has always been something that the factory has struggled with. Enstone's a place that's got a huge amount of history. Well before Renault, even in its first iteration there back in the noughties. So there's a lot of people that have been there doing things their way, in air quotes, for a long time. And I think a disconnect between that side of the team and the side that is more French, the management side of it, has been quite difficult to manage and something that they've needed to work on.
It's only really worked, that team, when it was Renault, when Renault basically stepped away. Flavio Briatore was put in charge. Now, Flavio Briatore is a very controversial figure, obviously. He orchestrated, or at least was involved in the orchestration of the Crashgate controversy in Singapore in 2008. He was head of Renault at the time. But basically, Renault got success with Fernando Alonso in the early to mid-2000s, led to 2 world championships with him, because they gave it to Flavio Briatore, and he raised the money, and he led the team, and he put the right people in place around him, starting with an absolutely world-class driver, world-class technical team, and he allowed that team to run in a way that Red Bull does now, as just a fully focused racing team. Since then, there's been various phases of Renault interference, and you've got a situation, you can track this back. If we look back to the driver market of 2022, what on earth were they doing? They thought they had Fernando Alonso and Oscar Piastri both lined up to drive for the team, and they lost both of them. One of the most promising young drivers of his generation and one of the greatest drivers of all time, they lost them both through mismanagement. They let that happen. Then I was at an investor day last summer at Alpine where Laurent Rossi, the former CEO of Alpine, stood up and made his case in front of all these bankers, people like JP Morgan and what have you, who are all going to invest. It was the day they announced the investment from Ryan Reynolds' group and, the actor and all the rest of it. And Rossi and Luca De Meo, the head of Renault, stood next to each other in Enstone and did this big speech about all their plans and how they were going to break America with the Alpine brand. 3 weeks later, they'd sacked Rossi. I mean, what is going on there? And now Bob Bell, who is one of the most respected technical minds in the whole pit lane, he's walked from Alpine and gone to Aston Martin. Something is very broken inside that team, and they really need to get a grip of it. The other, just one final point, the engine, it's the worst engine on the grid, because all the other 3 engine manufacturers have found a way to use the reliability clause in the engine freeze to increase the power. They haven't, or they've not done it as effectively. There's so many things going wrong, and Bruno Famin, the new team principal and CEO, he's really got a job on his hands to turn that team around now.
One of the most notable things out of what you've just said is actually that interference, if you like, from the management, the top level management, and the link between that and the success of the team. For sure, from what I've heard, that interference has only increased, and the push to get things happening more on the French side of the company rather than in Enstone, that transfer has been, increasing in the last few years. They're trying to take that more in-house, if you like, away from Enstone. So I don't think that the two things they must be linked in some way. And the mismanagement, especially in regards to things like the drivers, has been pretty terrible and has been going on for some while, not just with the ones that you've mentioned, but also even going back to when the whole fiasco with Daniel Ricciardo, when Cyril Abiteboul was in charge. I can tell you that was not a decision that was welcomed by many people within the management on the Enstone side, and created a lot of problems, and they were effectively overruled. And that kind of lack of cohesion, it surely is what's leading to all the problems they've got.
Right, let's hear from Pierre Gasly. He finished just behind his teammate in 18th place last time out. He's been discussing how he's feeling within the team.
The mood, we've all been disappointed with the start of the year, even though we knew it was going to be tough. I think we called it many times, and it was a very tough Bahrain Grand Prix. At least we got a starting point. We know what we got to work on. We know what we got to improve. And what I'm seeing from the team, actually, we're very united. Everyone is aware of the difficulties and limitations we're having, and everyone wants to find solutions. It's not an easy time, but the reaction I'm seeing from the team is positive, and definitely hope for every single person working and member of the team that we're going to be able to make the step forward we needed.
And what about the news with Matt and Dirk leaving the team? How do you feel about that restructuring and internally at Alpine going forward?
Yeah, it's obviously I've worked with them since I joined the team, and I was pretty close to them, so came as a surprise. But then, at the same time, I trust my team. I trust the people in charge of the management, Bruno, Luca, and I see positive changes in the team behind the scenes. Obviously, it doesn't reflect yet on the racetrack, but it's I trust the people in charge.
Okay, we've got just enough time to talk Saudi. Ha! Night race should be good. Second round. Harry, just bring us up to date with what happened last time out when we were here in Saudi.
Well, last time when we were here, it was Sergio Perez who was on pole position, and he went on to take the win as well. Max, so on paper, it's actually a Sergio Perez form book round, but Verstappen has had issues in several qualifyings over the last year. Had a drive shaft failure last year in qualifying, clipped a wall in qualifying back in 2021 as well. So far, from what we've seen in free practice, Max Verstappen is very much looking right back up and on the pace. It's a very different circuit as well to Bahrain. It's another night race, but it's a smooth surface as well. Track degradation, not as much as a key player. It's high speed, it's tight, it's narrow. The walls are very, very close. Lance Stroll, about 3 minutes into FP1, clipped the wall and was straight back into the garage. So different kind of race. We haven't quite seen the full potential of a lot of the teams from, Ferrari downwards, I think it's fair to say. So I'm actually quite intrigued as to how this will end up. So a lot of questions still to be answered, Andrew.
Well, I think the thing, Harry, is we don't know whether we've seen the full potential of the other teams. They got smacked by Verstappen and Red Bull in Bahrain.
Exactly, yeah.
They may not get smacked elsewhere, but they may. And I think on Verstappen, anyone who's not a Verstappen fan is not going to like what I'm about to say, but he wants to win every race, right? But the fact that this was one of the races he didn't win last year and that Perez did, he's going to be out there on a mission. Jack's just nodding quietly in the back to my left here. He's going to be out on a mission to prove that he can batter Perez in Saudi this weekend.
Absolutely.
Frankly.
I mean, that's the champion mindset, isn't it? And, Harry, what you said about the qualifying previously, really, Perez hasn't actually beaten him on merit so far, I think it's fair to say, at this track. So while the statistics are very much in his favour, we were on board with Max's lap for much of the qualifying before he hit that wall a couple of years ago. And it was a sensational lap. That was one of the best onboard laps in qualifying I've seen in a really long time. So it's a bit scary to think what he could have done if he had finished the lap. And, I don't see any reason why he can't come here and bury Perez again, really. I would love to see more competition, and certainly in the first practice session Checo was in the ballpark, but as we've seen, as the weekend goes on, that's where he tends to fall back, so that's where he's going to have to find something this weekend.
The thing is, though, I don't think it's been a good start to this year for Sergio Perez. There's been some talk about, he finished second, did what he needed to do, that's why he's there. He was over 20 seconds behind Max Verstappen, who I think it's quite widely believed was not pushing that Red Bull to its full capacity. Qualified fifth. Okay, qualifying, the margins are really tight. Leclerc could have been on pole. But this time last year, Perez was on a bit of a high momentum. He was going well. He didn't look too out of his depth compared to Verstappen. At one point, we thought, okay, is this championship alive? Is it going to be between the two Red Bulls? Here we go.
No, we didn't, Harry. Come on.
No, we did. From Saudi, we thought, okay, I did at least. After Saudi, okay, are we on to something? And then, of course, we had the crippling Miami race, wasn't it? And that really was the undoing of Sergio Perez and the end of that championship. But there's no sort of glimmers of hope for Perez at this stage.
No, you're going too soon on the no glimmers of hope.
No.
You've had one race.
Not. No, he's not.
You've had one race.
Oh my God, is Andrew Benson supporting a
Let's be
point?
absolutely clear about this, okay? Max Verstappen is a generational talent, right? He's one of the greatest drivers there's ever been. There's 2 or 3 drivers in the field who definitely could challenge him in the same car. Sergio Perez is not one of them. That's the end of the topic.
And Perez, to have a good season, needs to adapt his mindset, I think, Jack, and know that he can be there. If something happens to Verstappen reliability-wise, he can be the guy to pick up the win. If not, he needs to be utilised as a strategical tool for Red Bull as and when necessary. That's his role. And, you know, we've had it in the past. You look at the Eddie Irvines, the Rubens Barrichellos, the Felipe Massas. He needs to absorb that role. This is his big chance, and it has been in a top team finally to get those opportunities. But I can imagine as a driver that is a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, it's very tough. I think we saw him go through that last year because he, of all the people that believed that he might be in the championship fight, he was probably leading the way with that, as you have to be as an athlete. But and those hopes were dashed over the course of 6 months, and it was pretty hard to watch at times. And I think he's gone away. He's had a bit of a break, a bit of a reset, and probably a bit of pressure taken off his back. Let's see where he falls now.
Well, that's me told. Can we just talk quickly about the RBs? Last time out, they had almost a collision when they were coming back in with Ricciardo and Tsunoda. I think the team have talked to both of the drivers and said, this is how you're going to have to act in the future. Was that acceptable last time out?
I don't think so. I think that was really disappointing behaviour from Tsunoda, particularly what he did after the flag, because that is a time when drivers are not really alert and aware, because of course you're not expecting anything to happen. If Daniel had been a little bit less careful, or Yuki, because he was power sliding the car out of the corner as he did his flyby, if you like, on Ricciardo's car. If he had lost control a little bit more or whatever, and there'd been a collision after the flag, damaging the car before, the team's got to pack up and go home, that's the worst thing that you can do. It's so unnecessary. And he has to understand that in those situations when you've got two cars in the same team on a different strategy, it was well within the team's rights to ask him to move over and see if something would work. There was all the possibility that Ricciardo's pace was there, even if it then turned out that it wasn't, when they were quite similar on pace. That is the team's prerogative. He is an employee of the team. He has to be able to respect those decisions, even if they are not 100% right in the end.
And it was over 12th and 13th places. It's like, what on earth?
Yeah, it just doesn't justify the level of anger that he brought out. And this is something that we've seen multiple times with Yuki. So it's not a one-off thing. It is a problem that he has to get control of. And I think if he wasn't in a team or under an umbrella such as the Red Bull one, where they tend to like their drivers a bit more fiery, it wouldn't be tolerated, and he would have faced maybe more severe discipline.
So who's going to bring the challenge this weekend? I hate having to ask that question.
The battle for 12th is going to be one.
So I think Mercedes looked decently close in first practice. I think Mercedes can challenge Red Bull in qualifying. Maybe Ferrari can too, but not in the race. Not Verstappen anyway. But if they're closer, which they could be around this track, it's a very different characteristic to Bahrain. It's smooth, it's flowing, the track surface is very different. Bahrain's all about keeping your rear tyre temperatures under control. This is very different altogether. Maybe they can challenge Perez and get in between the Red Bulls, but it's hard to see anyone beating Verstappen. That car's so good, and so is he.
The only thing that could throw up something is this is one of those tracks where you feel like you're pretty much guaranteed a safety car. I think every race we've had here, well, that's not saying much, but every race so far has had a safety car or some kind of interruption. Might add something, but yeah, I tend to agree. It's going to be pretty difficult to challenge for first place.
Harry, give us some hope.
I think we'll see an absolutely amazing lap from Fernando Alonso in qualifying to upset the Apple Cart, but I don't think that will go through into the race again, much like Bahrain. And I think it will be George Russell who might be able to challenge Perez, but in the race. But if it will run smoothly, it'll be Verstappen's. I'm sorry.
You need to be sorry. Had enough. Right. Let's bring this show to a halt. Just to remind you, F1 Academy has launched this weekend. We haven't had time to talk about it, but 15 female drivers going up against each other, affiliated with the F1 teams. It looks like it's going to be really good. There's 7 events throughout this year, and they're all linked in with the F1 events. So it's great to see them on the calendar, scheduled in properly. So yeah, that's a really good thing.
Yeah, I think there's actually 16 drivers for this one because they have a wild card, and it's a woman called Rima Jafali, who is a Saudi Arabian racer, which is massive for what the sport's trying to do.
It was great to see all of the Formula One team liveried cars heading out on track. I watched practice, and seeing all of the F1 team liveried cars get out there was quite a nice sight to see, actually, and seeing competitive times heading out for the field. I think there's a great chance and great opportunity for them on an F1 weekend.
Exactly. Right. A reminder, qualifying is live on Friday. Yes, you heard that right. Friday. You can listen on Sports Extra from 5 p.m. And the race is on Saturday again at 5 p.m. on the BBC Sport website. You've been listening to an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.